Can you combine urgency and patience? This is something I've been musing on .earth lately.
Or fear and hope.
Yeah, so Matt, how would you, how do you wake up in the morning?
I was given a speech, well, now I work for the mayor of LA, but before I was given a speech to a bunch of architects in Baltimore. It was their 150th anniversary, about 800 architects, and this older architect came to me afterwards and said, how do you do it? How do you keep going? And I gave him some glib answer. He's like, no, seriously, you know the world's going to end. How do you keep going? And I said, I guess it's cognitive dissonance. We know the facts as they lay, but we have to keep focusing on human hope and potential to turn it around, and that we have the courage to overcome the fear to act.
Yeah, again, on this general question, when you think about these issues, what gets you going?
That you look at, of course, tells us that we don't respond to distant threats. And so talking about climate change as something that's going to happen to us doesn't get a rise out of almost anybody except maybe a handful of people. So our approach from a philanthropic perspective is to look at the issue as happening now and to look at the system that created it. To me, climate change is a symptom of something rather than just something that's happening.
And Mark, you don't have to be doing this, right? So yet you find the energy not just to be Hulk and to act in remarkable films, on profound issues related to HIV and the like. But how do you get up in the morning and make a big chunk of your day about water quality, air quality, and this kind of issue?
If you're losing hope, you're not doing enough. And it was the act of actually engaging in the problem that gave me hope, that gave me energy to keep pushing forward. And that's the only way we ever win anything.
And Sanjayan, there's so many things going on. Among conservation biologists, how do you fit the climate change challenge with those shapes into your agenda?
It's easy to lose hope. It's easy to really, really get depressed with this stuff. But if you're into this, if you're into the planet, into nature, into wildlife, into the things that matter, then there isn't a better time to be born, right? I mean, you ever wanted to be a hero? This is the time for it.
Right.
Like as a kid, you wanted to actually do something big and great. You actually can now. Because you're confronted with a problem that deals not just with our existence on the planet, but the existence of evolution and how it'll direct the course of the Great Barrier Reef that we were talking about fisheries, about oysters, about basically everything. And so, for me, climate change, you can work on it directly, some of us do, or you can work on it indirectly. But honestly, it's all related.
I think the most important thing we can do right now, given the opportunity of where we are lucky to be living now with all the tools we've got, is to figure out where are the levers really, right? When you look at a problem as complex as climate change, there are things I believe you can do to intervene in the system as it exists now and help transform it. We do a lot of work with cities and mayors and regions and states. We actually think that's where the laboratories are for these kinds of changes. And it's where you can attack just not the technical side of it and the fact that we understand, say, the built environment is needing to be refurbished, but you can also attach the human rights side of it. You can bring equity into this equation and say, as we move to clean, renewable energy, we want it available to everyone. My orientation is don't put money into things where you're just doing what everybody else has already done. Right. And we've worked with Mark on the Solutions Project because these guys actually have a plan for every state in the country to move to 100% renewable energy. So let's put money where maybe more risk-averse entities like the government won't do. Right. That's our job. We can take the risk, and we should.
So could you talk about the community building power? This relates to the things government has to do a lot, but if communities are not engaged, then an opportunity is missed. So just talk about that part of it.
Where community comes in is how we keep that oil in the ground. Yeah. And how we keep that gas in the ground. Now, there's this whole high-level discussion going on with politicians and corporations. We're gonna work our way out of this by selling more solar systems and more cars. But the fact of the matter is we're doing it at the cost of our poor communities who are living with oil drilling here in Los Angeles and all over the nation. And that's where this is a shift I've made. We invest in those people who are fighting for their lives. Invest in them. Give them the money. Give them materials. Give them the support, because they're fighting for their lives. They're going to fight no matter what they have. I've been there. I know what it looks like. Moms fighting for their kids, the health of their kids. Here in Los Angeles, it's happening.
Yeah.
And so that's how we're going to make change.
So I wanted to get to we've been talking mainly, or at least largely, about the fuel side, the energy side so far, but there's the resilience side. Many parts of the world are so fundamentally vulnerable just to today's climate hazards, let alone what's coming.
We have extreme heat coming to Los Angeles for longer periods of time. It's already happening. We're getting a more humid climate. We're getting record highs throughout the year, like we're seeing around the world. But what do we do about it? We need to reduce that urban heat island effect, and we've set a target in our sustainable city plan, the second city in the world to do it. And the strategies are planting trees, restoring and keeping our urban forests healthy, planting more trees in strategic places, in neighborhoods, as Mark was talking about, that have diesel exhaust, oil drilling, and lots of other offenses put upon them from decades of industry and other, quote-unquote, progress that's coming through your neighborhood. And we need to help these neighborhoods and the entire city to be a healthier, cooler city by not only through trees and green infrastructure, but also things like cool surfaces, like light-colored rooftops or light-surfaced roadways, where we are experimenting with coatings we're putting on cul-de-sacs and parking lots that will reflect the heat rather than absorb it and reduce the ambient temperature by 10 degrees Fahrenheit, which is significant.
We haven't had a chance to talk about California agriculture. It's something that we're very interested in. Speaking about resilience, healthy food systems are something that is becoming a demand across the country. And we're certainly very aware of what's going on in the Central Valley and working in Fresno and communities like that with food hubs, linking sustainable farming communities with purchasers like UC Merced to create new markets. That's another thing we can do.
The challenging news about thinking about this problem globally is that a lot of countries look at what we have and they say, well, why can't we have that too? And that's a reasonable question to ask. The good news is that you can make a big difference because some of the barriers to making things happen haven't yet happened there. You could scale something very quickly in some countries outside the United States that you would have a lot of trouble making happen here in the U.S.
And so Sri Lanka, where your roots are in Sri Lanka, right? They just committed to a huge increase in mangrove
complete
planting.
ban on clearing of all mangroves on the entire coast of Sri Lanka. I mean, I left Sri Lanka when I was a kid, so I had nothing to do with that ban, just to be completely clear. But it's an enormous step for a small island nation to make it. And if you really look at these small countries and look at what they're doing, it's really, really impressive. And that's where I get a lot of hope from. They're just acting, and they're acting fast, and they're not necessarily waiting for all of us to give them permission to act.
What's your final get up and go message on this issue?
We need our governments to lead. We need the White House to lead. We need our corporations to lead. We need our foundations, our actors, our scientists to lead. We need our journalists to lead. But we need individuals to lead. So I just encourage you to continue your advocacy and your activism in your neighborhood, whatever your chosen passion is that pisses you off or makes you happy and makes your heart just flow with love. Love your community, love your home, which is our planet, and our family, which is humanity, and take responsibility for a corner of your world. That's all I encourage you to do.
And Wendy?
I would just suggest that if you're not paying attention, pay attention. I often say to people I get my environmental news from the business section, because you can read the trends and you can see what's happening. Sometimes that's a cause for significant optimism in watching markets shift towards new forms, say, in food consumption. So pay attention, get involved, and remain hopeful.
And Mark?
Get plugged in, get activated, find where your passion is, keep going at it, keep making people uncomfortable. I learned from you tonight. The old system takes without replenishing in kind. This whole new system is distributed. And so treat yourself in the same way you want the new system to be, which means don't burn yourself out. Enjoy your life, enjoy your communities, enjoy the connections you have, your relationships to your families, and fight. And if we each take a little piece of the burden, we don't have to take on the whole burden. Don't be terrified of feeling like you got to fix this problem today. One little tiny action has such huge, when we do it, when we distribute it amongst everybody, it has such power.
You know, 50 years ago, I think we could have played dumb. We really didn't know what's around the corner. But for the first time in the history of humanity, we can actually peek around the corner. We genuinely can predict some parts of the future. We know what's coming. I truly believe that 20, 30 years from now, it really will be too late. The burden would be too high to overcome. So now's the time. If you ever wanted to be a hero, now's the time. So whatever you do, don't sit this one out. You know, do what you can where you're at with what you have, but don't sit it out.
Bravo. Well, I thank you